And we're back. Hey everybody, welcome back to RC with Adam. My name is Adam, and if you just came from the previous video where we set up our transmitter with our receiver for our budget basher, then you are in the right place. But if you haven't seen those videos, I'm going to leave a link in the description below so that you can see the whole build playlist as we build our 5-inch budget quadcopter here. Now, at this point, we are ready to connect to BetaFlight, and let me just say for a second, let me just take a second here and explain to you, if you don't know what BetaFlight is, you probably do by now, but if you don't know what BetaFlight is an application that you download and install on your computer, and that is how we change all of the settings in the flight controller, and we do that by connecting the flight controller via USB cable to our computer. So if you don't have BetaFlight downloaded yet, I'm not going to cover it in this video. I'm actually going to leave a link in the description to Joshua Bardwell's video. If you haven't heard of him, definitely go check out his channel. He's the FPV know-it-all, and he can explain it a lot better and in much more detail than I can or even want to in terms of downloading BetaFlight and the drivers required to connect your quadcopter and have everything talking to each other. So speaking of drivers, you will need the Zadig driver tool thingy, I believe is the technical term for it. And what I did to get that actually is I downloaded the Impulse RC driver fixer. And I would recommend you do that. I'll leave a link in the description as well to the Impulse RC driver fixer. And what that basically is it's like a little piece of software or whatever the technical term is, and it goes on your computer and it analyzes what you plug into your computer to see if what kind of driver you need for it. So it will just basically automatically have the driver that you need. So that's fantastic. So I just downloaded that, and I would try downloading that first and see if that will work for you to get all the drivers that you need. I just want to let you know that this is probably the most finicky, tricky part about setting up your quadcopter, and it can be just kind of frustrating in terms of actually, connecting your quadcopter to your computer and getting everything talking to each other. So if it doesn't work the first time, it's okay. It happens a lot. That's just kind of how it goes right now. So don't get discouraged about that. But I'm going to walk you through this whole process right now. So the first thing I want you to be aware of is that what we're going to do is we're going to flash the flight controller, which basically means we're just going to do like an update on the for the software or firmware or whatever the heck it's called. We're going to do an update, and to do that, what we have is right here is a bootloader button, and that's going to put it into bootloader mode, which basically just means it'll be ready to update. So what we're going to do is we're going to hold down this little tiny button right here on the side of our flight controller board, and we're going to hold that down as we plug in our USB cable when we flash the flight controller. Any other time you don't need to hold down the button, but just if you want to update the flight controller, you need to hold down the button as you plug in the cable. So speaking of the cable, you want to make sure that your USB cable is capable of transferring data, and it's not just power, not just a power cable. So if it seems like you have everything correct, and for some reason your quadcopter is still not talking to your computer, it might be your cable, and it could also just be that you have like a low quality cable, or the physical cable connection in your laptop just might not be good. So try switching cables if it doesn't work. So the first thing that we're going to do is we are going to, let's jump into BetaFlight right now. Let's get into, let's open up our BetaFlight application here, and we're going to be in the main screen and the home screen, and then we're going to go over to the left hand side, and we're going to click Firmware Flasher. And what we're going to do is we are going to, let's go ahead and connect our flight controller. So I'm going to connect one side to the USB port on the computer, the other side. As I hold down the little bootloader button, I'm going to connect the cable to my quadcopter flight controller. And you can see on the flight controller, I just get a solid kind of amber colored orangey light. Back in BetaFlight here, I'm going to, I've already done this, so it knows kind of what I'm probably going to want. So on this drop down menu where it says choose your board, you want to select Fury F4 OSD for this flight controller that we're using, the Mamba flight controller. And on the firmware version, you probably just want to go with the most recent one. So like this one, we'll just go with that. There's probably going to be a more recent one by the time you do this. And we're just going to ignore all this other stuff right now unless we actually need it. We're going to scroll down to the bottom here, and there's just a bunch of like information and, you know, technical stuff if you're interested. And we're going to click Load Firmware Online. So we need to have an internet connection for that. And it says Loaded Firmware. So now we're going to click Flash Firmware, and if we did everything right, with our fingers crossed, it'll actually work. Oh, and it is. Wow. And it says Erasing. And now it's flashing. That's pretty cool. Now, if it's not uncommon for it to not work on the first try, so if it doesn't work on the first try, just take a deep breath and try. Probably the first thing to try is just disconnect everything, close BetaFlight, open BetaFlight, reconnect everything, and you know, go from there. But you know, if you have any problems, leave them in the comments below, and I'll try to help you best I can. All right, programming successful. That's fantastic. I love it when that happens. So that's great. We can go back. Well, we'll just yeah, we can go back to the main screen. It doesn't really matter. Now we can disconnect our quadcopter. Ta-da! Quadcopter disconnected, and now we're going to connect it again to the USB, but this time we are not going to press down the bootloader button. And those are the lights that I'm getting. It's a blinking blue light with a solid amber colored light. And now in BetaFlight, we're going to click on the top right hand corner, connect, and it should connect. And if it does, it's like woo. And then now notice how the this quadcopter, this is our little reference quad, is not anywhere near level. So what we want to do is physically we want to level our quad out. Maybe we might need to shim it, but we want to try and get it as close to level as possible. And then we're going to click Calibrate Accelerometer. That's the first thing we want to do. And you can see it's our little quadcopter, our little virtual quadcopter, now responds correctly to my movements of the actual quadcopter. So that's good, and it's especially important for like well, for a lot of things, but like for level flight and whatnot. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to go over to the Ports tab. Now in the Ports tab, we want to turn off Serial RX for UART1, and we want to, over here in the Peripherals column, we're going to select TBS Smart Audio for our smart audio. And then over here in UART3, we're going to select Serial RX. Okay, click Save and Reboot. So we're going to get back in here, and now let's see the Ports tab. So yep, that saved it correctly. And then we're going to go into the Configuration tab here. Now the Configuration tab, we've got quite a bit of stuff to do. So Quad X, that's fine. We want to select Motor Direction is Reversed in this little mixer box. Motor Direction is Reversed. For our, over here on the ESC box on the right, we want to select D-Shot 600. Okay, and we want to make sure that the motor stop is not selected. We don't want this to be selected. And then let's see here. Let's go down here. Let's put Budge on here for our craft name. Just to, it's kind of useful sometimes to be able to know what you're flying. Oh, on the right hand side on the arming box, what we're going to do is we're going to type in 180. And that means we can arm at any angle, and that can be really useful if you get stuck upside down or in a tree or something like that. I'm going to turn on turtle mode in this one, but you don't have to, but we'll get to that. So serial receiver, what we're going to do in this receiver box, we're going to, in this drop-down menu, we're going to select serial-based receiver, if it's not already. And then in this lower drop-down box, we're going to select iBus, because that's what we are using. And then we can go down here. There's all other kinds of features that you can select or not select. Some people like to permanently enable air mode, but I am not going to do that. I like it on a switch. And let's see here. Here's a cool one, D-Shot beacon configuration. So what this actually allows us to do, so we'll go ahead and select RX lost and RX set. So what this allows us to do is actually our ESCs will beep if we lose signal with our transmitter, or if we just set it up to beep on a switch or a dial or something like that. So we can have it beep whenever we want it to. And that's really cool because we don't actually have a beeper installed on here, so we're kind of getting some extra use out of the ESC beepers, which is nice. And the beeper configuration, basically as it's set up, it's going to beep for like everything, but I don't really want it to beep for everything. Like I don't want it to beep for disarming. I don't want it to beep for, probably don't want it to beep for battery low. I'm not sure. Sometimes the voltages can be, you might have to play around with the voltage settings a little bit. But anyway, I'll just leave this, I'm just going to leave this alone, but you can come back and change it however you like. So now we're going to click save and reboot at the bottom right hand corner. And it kicked us back out, and that's okay. And we're going to connect back up. Let's see, we were on configuration. All right, we're not going to mess with power and battery right now. Let's go down to the Failsafe tab on the left-hand side. If you don't have the Failsafe tab, then go to the top right-hand corner in BetaFlight and click Enable Expert Mode, and that will bring up the Failsafe tab. Now, I would recommend, if you're not super confident in messing around with the failsafe, that you just leave it to defaults. Now, in case you don't know what your failsafe is, the failsafe is what the quadcopter will fall back to in case it loses connection with the transmitter. So by default, it's just set to drop out of the sky, which has its pros and cons. But what I'm going to do is I'm just gonna set this to land. I guess just to kind of give you an example of something that you might do. I don't know if you'd really want to, because again, there's pros and cons. But what I'm doing is I'm going to set this to land, and I'm going to set the throttle value to 1100, and which is like a little bit above idle. And then I'm going to set a 4-second delay. And then over here on aux, let's see, what is it? Aux 3. Aux 3. I'm going to set. I'm going to hit set right here, and I'm going to set this to 1950. And what that basically is, it'll make sense in a little bit. And what that's going to do is it's going to cause the quadcopter to go into auto level mode, which I feel like is a good idea. And that way, the quadcopter will basically just land. Well, it won't just land, but what I mean is it will, instead of falling out of the sky, it will decrease in throttle value for a certain amount of seconds, and then it will fall out of the sky. So the idea here is basically that you can get it lower to the ground before it falls out of the sky, and maybe make it either more. It's more likely that it will survive the impact, whatever it falls on, and if it falls on something, some sort of soft target or expensive hard target, it will cause less damage. So that's what I'm going to leave it at. But like I said, don't even worry about this. Set it, just keep it at defaults. Yeah, that's what I would do. So I'm going to click save and reboot. The next thing is PID tuning, and this is where we're going to put in our rates, and I think that's going to be much more important than your actual PID settings. So don't even worry about these settings right here. These guys, don't worry about those. But what we want are the RC rate, super rate, and RC expo. Now, if you're just learning how to fly, I would set these extremely low, but I'm going to put in mine. Like I would probably set these, if you're just starting, probably somewhere around like 360 degrees per second, or something like that. But I'm going to go ahead and plug in mine how I like them, and you can absolutely play around. In fact, you will be playing around with these and getting these, tweaking them until you can kind of figure out how you fly best with what rates you fly best with. 0.37. Okay. And those are just the rates that I like to fly with for now. They seem to be working pretty well. So I'm going to go down to the bottom right hand corner and click save. All right, now let's get into our receiver tab, and this tab is where we're going to check and make sure that our transmitter is doing what it's supposed to do and whatnot. So let's get a battery, and we're going to get our transmitter. We're gonna turn on our transmitter. We're going to take our battery and plug it into our quadcopter, making sure we do not have propellers on our quadcopter. All right, and you can see some stuff going on here. Now, as I move these controls, you can see them moving on the on the screen there. And one thing we want to make sure is that the channel map is the correct one over here in this channel map box. That's the correct one for our transmitter, and it is for this one AETR1234. And you can tell by, you can see which ones, if your pitch moves your pitch on the little bars and whatnot, and also your switches, what your switches do, and all that stuff. So that can be useful. One thing I want to note here is that kind of the way that this kind of works is that these numbers here, so you'll see when the switches are off, or well, when the switches are in the up position, they're lower on the bar, and it says 1000. When the switch is in this case, on this transmitter, the full downward position, it says 2000. And if it's like in the middle, it'll say 1500. So basically our range with these numbers is between 1000 and 2000. So the way I'm kind of doing this, way I'm sort of setting this up, is my switches are going to be in sort of the off or inactive position when they are down, when they are physically down, and then when they are up, that's going to be on. And this might seem kind of confusing, but basically what I'm saying for our purposes, okay, up corresponds with 1000 and down corresponds with 2000. But anyway, I just wanted to kind of explain that to you. Hopefully you are not as confused as you were couple seconds ago. All right, so now, so over here in the RSSI channel box, we're going to set this to channel. We're going to set this to channel 10, or aux 10 rather. We're going to set it to aux 10, and that's going to give us our RSSI, our receiver signal strength indicator. Good, so we know our receiver is working, and I'm just going to ignore all this other stuff for now. And there's a little preview box to kind of show you what it does, but my computer's kind of slow, so it doesn't do it very accurately. So we're going to go down to the bottom right-hand corner and click Save. And now, let's just leave everything plugged in, and we're going to go down to the Modes tab. And this is the tab, this is where we get the magic to happen, kind of. So first thing is we have ARM. Now, what I like to do is I like to set my ARM switch to the left-hand switch, the far left switch on here. And you'll notice on the little ARM, you see this little tick mark at the 1000? And then when I flip the switch down, it goes over to the 2000. So what that means is, depending on where I put this bar is where the arming will be active. So in this case, when I flip the switch up, that's when I want it to be armed. So I'm going to drag this bar over to this section so that when it's at the 1000 or the up position, it's going to be armed, and down is going to be disarmed because there's no little box over here. The box is right over here over the 1000. So that's kind of how this whole section thing works. And then what I'm going to do, and that's aux 1. And what I'm going to do here for angle, I'm going to set angle to aux 3, which is our 3-position switch here. And you can see the little tick mark moving, okay? So I want the full downward position to be angle mode. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this box over to the 2000 side, the far right-hand side. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to select air mode, because I do want to have air mode. And if you don't know what air mode is, go check out my video about air mode, explaining what air mode is. I'll put a link probably right there. And so we have air mode on aux 3, and I'm going to have it so that when this switch, when the aux 3 switch is all the way up, or switch C, you might say, is all the way up, I'm going to have air mode turned on. So what that ends up being is that this middle portion, there's no bar on this for the aux 3 in the middle, and so that's going to default to just regular acro mode. All right, now this one I'm going to add, if you're just getting started into this, don't even worry about this. It's just going to be more confusing for you. But if it's a feature that you want to have, this is flip over after crash, also known as turtle mode. Because, like a turtle, because these quads, if they flip over on their back, they aren't usually able to get up like a turtle. So what we're going to do is I'm going to put that on aux 2. So it's going to be the switch next to my arming switch. So this switch right here, and I'm going to have it so that, again, when the switch is in the upward position, it's in the the on position. And what turtle mode does, I'll do a video or something demonstrating that. There's lots of them out there, but it basically just reverses the motors so you get thrust in the opposite direction that you normally would, and then you're able to flip back over. And that can be good. Like, I wouldn't rely on that all the time. Like, if you can go and pick up your quad, you should do that and check it out, especially if it's a new quad and you're not quite sure how it's going to handle crashes. So that's the thing. You don't really want to rely on this all the time, but it could get you out of a tight spot. And one more thing, in the modes tab, what we want to do is we want to enable this beeper. So I'm going to click add range on the beeper, and I'm going to select in this drop down box to aux 5. I'm going to select it to aux 5, which is variable A. It corresponds to this little dial, and you can see the little tick mark moving as I rotate this dial. So let's go ahead and put it like in the, I don't know, the far right hand rotation position. And I'm just putting it on this dial because I don't really want to take up a switch by using this. So this way, when I rotate the dial to the far right, the beeper will turn on, and that's pretty handy. So we're gonna set that, and we're gonna save it. And after we've saved it, we can see that when I move it, the beepers, the ESCs start beeping, just like that. And that's actually going to be it for now. One thing I would you might be interested in is the acro trainer mode. We might do a video or something on this later, or we might use this for some flight videos later. But what acro trainer is it's basically like acro mode, but it will not let you move. It won't let you rotate past a certain number of degrees. So it's kind of you can kind of think of it like training wheels on a bike. You know, like you might tip a little bit, but you won't tip that much, so you won't go inverted, which is kind of nice, because once you get inverted, you kind of freak out, and then if you have throttle, then you start going down really fast. So that's probably a good idea. So you might want to look into acro trainer. And then let's see, we can at this point we can turn off our transmitter, and we can unplug our battery from our quadcopter, and we can turn off our transmitter so we're not using up those batteries. Okay, that does it for the modes. Let's head over to the OSD tab here, and there are of course other tabs that you can get into, but we won't cover those right now. But the OSD is something we're going to want. So you know, you could probably, I mean, don't worry about putting all this junk on your screen. It can be distracting. I usually just ignore it, actually, but some of the things that I like to put on there is like RSSI value, which, you know, tells me how kind of my strength of, which tells me how good the signal is from my radio, and I'm going to put it there. Now, the one thing is that depending on how your goggles, kind of how this screen will fit your goggles, what you might find is that you need to put, if you put, you know, an item all the way out on the edge of the screen, it might not actually show up in your goggles. So I'm not totally sure where I need to put this. So for now, I'm just going to kind of put it off to the side of the screen, and we can fine tune that later. I also want main battery voltage. I'll put that like right there. I like to have the artificial horizon. I'm not sure why. I guess my thinking is like if my camera lens ever gets like fogged up or something, but I still have the OSD, then at least I'll kind of be able to tell whether or not I'm in level flight or kind of like hovering. I don't know. Maybe it just looks cool. The next thing, I like to have timer 2, so the total armed time. So every time I flip the timer switch, every time I flip the arm switch, it will start the timer. So I'll just put those up there for now. And then I do like to have the fly mode. I find that to be rather useful, and I'm not sure where to put that, so I'm just going to put it like right there. Let's put it like right there-ish. This little low voltage thing, that's just like a warning. That's where the warning will show up if there is a warning. Let's see, craft name. The craft name can be kind of helpful because sometimes, like if I have flight footage and I need to remember which quadcopter I was actually flying, that can be helpful. Throttle position is also nice because this way, again, when reviewing flight footage, you can tell like, oh yeah, okay, so I had, you know, 0 throttle right there, or I had max throttle, and just kind of kind of be able to kind of get a better idea of what you were doing and kind of what was going on. Let's see here. So there's all these different kinds of, I mean, you could probably just fill up the whole screen with all this stuff. It's pretty crazy, really. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, as far as the warnings, I'm going to go over the warnings here. And let's see, arming disabled, battery not full. I'm going to turn off battery not full because I'm not totally sure if it's calibrated correctly. Let's see, battery warning, battery critical. I'm going to battery alert. See, I don't really want that whole, I don't want it to flash just for the battery warning. So, because I'll have the voltage in the top right hand corner, so I can just monitor that myself. I'll just leave the rest of them as they are. And what do we have here? Okay, get rid of that logo. AutoPal, NTSC. Okay. And then we have the post-flight statistics, which is pretty cool because then you can kind of see like your battery voltage, minimum RSSI, all this other stuff, as well as black box and stuff. But I'm not really using that right now. All right, and then of course you can also change the font to your liking. I don't really like any of these fonts, but I'm just going to leave it as it is right there. Now I'm just going to click save and let's see, OSD, yeah. Now we're going to click save at the bottom right hand corner. And that's it. I think we're ready to go. Let me go back to the ports tab and just make sure, yeah, it is how I had it set up. So, all right. So let's now we'll disconnect our quadcopter and then we are ready to check the motor direction and make sure that the failsafe works. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn on our transmitter here, and then we're going to connect our battery to our quadcopter. Make sure you do not have propellers on your quadcopter. We're going to plug this in. Okay, that's good. That's good. So let's see if our arming switch works. It does. Very nice. Now what we want to do is to check the motor direction. You can just kind of put your finger around, the motor and see which way it pulls your finger. Be careful. And I can feel that it's spinning. It's spinning in the proper direction. This one is not. So that's spinning actually inward. Let's see, this one, this back left one, that's spinning in the proper direction. And then this one, that's spinning the right way as well. So they're both spinning outward from the back middle. So we can disarm it now. And so we need to change this one. I'm just going to put a little dot to mark this one as the motor that we need to swap. And then what we're going to do now, let's check the failsafe. So what we're going to do is we're going to raise the throttle a little bit, and then I'm going to shut the transmitter off. Okay, and then you can hear, there we go, and it stopped. Now the reason why it took so long to do that was because I had set mine to land, and so I set a delay on the shutoff time, basically. Now if you leave it at default, it should just shut right off after maybe 3 seconds max. So that's just how I have mine. But the important thing is it did shut off, and the reason why those motors were spinning up was because I had mine set to go to angle mode before it turned off. It went into angle mode, and the motors were basically, they kind of went back to like an idle position. So that way it will sort of land gently. And the reason why the motors are beeping right now is because we had set the motor beep to, it's not actually the motors, but it's the ESCs. We had set that to beep until the connection was restored. So I'm going to turn this back on, and they should stop beeping. There we go. They stopped beeping. Let's see here. Turn everything back off. Yeah, and unfortunately, right? Yeah, you'll probably have to, if you have a fail-safe, you'll probably have to unplug the quadcopter and then plug it back in before you can arm again. I'm pretty sure that's standard. I mean, let's swap these motor wires. Take 2 motor wires. It doesn't matter which wire it is. And now at this point, I kind of realized that it is sort of problematic if you have, you know, one of the wires incredibly shorter than the other. But what we're going to do is we're just going to heat up one wire. We're going to remove it. Whoa there. It's kind of flipping back on me. Come on, buddy, get out of the way. And we're going to swap it. Swap this other wire right here. And I really hope this will reach. This should reach, so if I need to, I'm just going to kind of pull it around this way. Yeah, that'll reach just fine. There you go. And then we're just gonna heat it back up and then solder it right back on there. So you see we swapped the position that it was in, and now we're going to put this one back on here, just like this. If I can get a hold of it with my tweezers. There we go. Beautiful. All right, now we're going to test it again, make sure that fixed it. If that fixed the direction. So again, we're going to, this one is also spinning outward in this direction. They're all spinning correctly. Hey, real quick, I think this will help you a lot if you're using this camera or a similar camera. What I'm going to show you is we're going to connect the little toggle thingy here to the little connector. This is going to allow us to access the OSD on the camera and change the camera settings. Now, everybody likes a different camera setting, so I'm not going to go through it in depth, but what I do want to show you, I'm going to connect our quadcopter here, and I've got my goggles here, and we're on the correct channel. So what I do want to show you here is, so you can see there's our OSD that we put on there from BetaFlight, and I've already taken off the OSD that comes on here automatically. Now, if you want to, the way to do that is you just get your little toggle thingy, and you just press the up button, press and hold, and then you can see that this is going to pop up, and then you just scroll through the menu and you turn everything off, and then you hit exit and save. Now what we're going to do is we're going to press the middle button, going to go into the menu, and I think probably the biggest difference that you'll notice in how this looks, or at least to me, so what I like is we're going to change the exposure to, we're going to take the DWDR and we're going to turn that on, and then we're going to return back to the menu. We're going to hit special, and then we're going to go to image adjust, and then sharpness. I'm going to turn down the sharpness a little bit because I don't want it too sharp. And honestly, I mean, you want to be looking through this at kind of your flight area, but I'm showing you as an example here. And the contrast, you might want to turn it down or up depending on, you know, how you like it. I'm going to turn both of those down just a little bit, and then I'm going to hit return, and exit. There we go. So that's how you kind of can change your settings. I think that DWDR is the biggest difference. That's going to really give you that wide dynamic range, and why it's not on there already, I don't know. So we can get rid of this, and you can just tuck this little guy in there if you like, and we can just get it out later with tweezers or something. I'll go ahead and unplug this. One more thing I want to share with you. If you need a battery pad, but you don't have a battery pad, what you can do is you can take the pads that came here, the little landing pads that usually go right there, but you can take them and you can cut them down to about half or less height, and then what we're going to do is just stick these guys on here. I know it's not the best, and if you get one of those UmaGrip battery pads, it's probably way better, but what we can do is we can just stick them right on here, and what it's going to do is just kind of protect the battery from hitting these screws and stuff. We'll just put it just like that. That way our battery can just sit right on there. Probably something like this. This is a Race Day Quads battery, and these are pretty dang fat, but some batteries, they're not quite so fat, and they might fit on there a little bit better. And for the battery strap, I'm just going to get this, use this one, and it's pretty darn long, but I kind of need it to be really long because this battery is so fat. So if you have a skinnier battery, it probably doesn't need to be as long. And I'm just going to run it under our stack right through here. I'm sure there are multiple ways you could do this. Nice and tight, nice and snug. Usually what I do is I have a rubber band on this battery when they're charged up. This one's not charged up. So it's going to look something like that. There you go. And then to plug it in, we can run the lead right through here, just like that. Or you could go back around the other side, or if you want to mount it on the top, you can just run the lead right up to the top there. Alright, we'll put some props on here, and I'm using these DAL T5040C propellers. I really like these ones. Now we want to make sure that we put the propellers in the right direction, so you can see here that kind of the way, you can see how the blade is angled up. The side that's angled up is the direction that it wants to spin, and that means, and also these are kind of swooped, they're kind of swept backwards, so those are going to go like that, so they're going to spin out, and these ones will spin out this way, just like that. And you might notice that these ones are kind of beat up. That's because usually when I do a first test flight, I just like to use propellers that aren't nice propellers in case I'm going to crash or something goes wrong with the quadcopter. That way I won't damage brand new propellers. Now here's a little tip for when you're tightening these down. What I found works really well, unless you have motor guards or something, I like to grasp them like this. So I'm kind of wrapping my thumb around the motor and pinching it between my first finger, and that way I have a lot of contact with the motor, and I can kind of hold everything steady and in place as I'm tightening it. And if that's not enough, if it's still slipping out of my hands, I'll just take a rubber band and then put it on around the motor housing, the motor bell there, and then just tighten it down and get it a better grip. These nuts are actually not very tight. I mean, the self-lockingness was not, they're not very difficult to put on, but some can be very difficult and very tight. So if you do have problems with that, you can heat up the nut, like by putting it in boiling water or just warm water, and it'll kind of soften the nylon self-locking portion there. Well, everybody, thank you so much for joining me in this build. I think we're going to have a lot of fun flying this thing, and stay tuned for more videos. In the next video, we're actually going to go out and test fly it. I was going to put it in this one, but this has been kind of a long video. I want to get a lot of information out to you, so stay tuned in the next video, and we're actually going to go out and we're going to test fly this thing and fly it around, have a great time. So thanks for watching. I hope this build video was helpful to you. If it was, please leave me a comment below. And if I left anything out, let me know. I want to make sure that this is as together as possible for you guys, and I'm not leaving you hanging in any way. So thank you. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. Give it a thumbs down if you didn't. And consider subscribing to this channel if you like what you see and you want to see more. And if you have already subscribed, thank you. I appreciate you. I appreciate your support. Until next time, this has been Adam with RC with Adam. I'll see you on the next one.